This is episode number 119 featuring artist John Lasater.
This is the PleinAir podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Well, thank you, announcer Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir podcast. I am so excited. I guess you could say I'm kind of jacked up because, well, we're down to the wire. Depending on when you're listening to this, we're like moments, days away from the PleinAir convention, which is my favorite time of year, my favorite event of the year. I just love being there with my tribe and hanging out with all of you, and so I am looking forward to it. I'm guessing by now that if you're not going, well, you've decided not to go. And, well, I respect your decision, even though it's a bad one. Well, I know you can't all go at the same time anyway. There's not enough room for everybody. But anyway, you could still get a ticket if you wanted to by calling us or going to pleinairconvention.com. And if you're not getting our email updates, you want to get on those right away, because if you're not getting our emails, then you're missing out on events like we're going to be talking about the new PleinAir convention. The minute we announce where we're going, we're going to be talking about the new Adirondack painting event, some new videos. We got so much going on. We just love telling you about all this stuff. So you don't want to miss that. Anyway, you can do that by going to outdoorpainter.com. A little thing will pop up, ask you if you want our 240 tips email. It's a book that we've created. It's great tips on PleinAir painting from a lot of different people. So you want that. Anyway, just sign up, get your name in there, and then you'll be getting our stuff. All right. And okay, after the interview, I'll be doing some art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. But first, our interview with John Lasater. John Lasater, welcome to the PleinAir podcast.
Thank you, Eric. Great to speak with you, and just appreciate this chance. It's great.
Oh, well, the honor is ours. We love getting to know you, and an opportunity for everybody to get to know you. You're an amazing guy. So for the people who probably haven't yet figured out who you are, why don't you tell everybody what it is you do? What do you consider yourself to be as a painter?
I really don't know. You know, it changes all the time for me. But I'm starting to get more of a grasp on that, I guess. I think I'm beginning to see, my PleinAir work is as a way to, it gives me direction on the front end of everything else that I like to do. So, now I'm maybe spending more time in the studio after about, 10 hard years of really focusing on PleinAir work. And when I'm in the studio, it really guides me. I think about it a lot, and when I write on art, it's always kind of in the context of that, because that was my training ground. So it means that I really care about the things that PleinAir affords us, like getting to see natural color, and to see values as they really are, and to struggle with light and all of that. So
do you feel as though when you're in the studio that you're at that point that if you never went outdoors again, that painting from a reference, whatever that reference might be, whether it's another painting or a painting from a photograph, do you feel like your studio paintings forever from this point forward would possess the natural elements of PleinAir?
I feel like they could rather than would, So I'm feeling a lot more of a desire to be selective when I'm in the studio.
What does that mean?
So, what I've noticed is there really is quite, there's variety between outdoor painters. And that and it's not as varietous as maybe personalities, but like some seem to approach it with more of a it just gives them maybe shape ideas, or and then they kind of tend to go back into things that they're used to doing. Others see it more as like a empirical study, and so they're interested in that. I would say I'm more in the empirical camp, except that I don't have a mind for really retaining information. I don't know. It's rooted in this personality that I would rather start something or be at the very beginning of an area of knowledge. Like if I were to be a rocket scientist, I would want to be out in the yard playing with fire and dynamite to try to figure out how to, rather than finding some book on rocket science and reading through it and then starting at where they are in the present time.
So you're advocating for being self-taught.
Well, no, I'm not necessarily. It's just that I really like knowing reasons, like I want to know why this, why that. And so if somebody says, hey, to send that rocket into space, you just need to push this button, then I'm going to say, why? And they're going to say, well, because somebody came up with a button about, 30 years ago. And then I would say, why, and then, so I always dive down into the root anyway. But so plein air painting, is the root. It's that. It's like everybody before nature becomes a student. So, and if I had more of a mind for this kind of thing, I probably, the empirical study, I probably would memorize things that I've learned. But I've seen so much variety in nature that I just keep telling myself, don't go there. Don't decide that the sky at 4 p.m. looks like this, or that, that a pine tree has this quality to it. So instead, I just sort of forget those things after I've finished. And I don't even keep the plein air studies around necessarily to remind me.
What do you do with them?
I sell a lot of them because that's a big part of my business. I keep some around, but I think what's happened is I've learned in a way that I can't explain. And so when I look at a photo in the studio now, I just sort of know what to do with it. And if I don't, if I run into frustration, I'll just scrape it away and deal with it. But there's something wonderful about going into it with a certain degree of naivete every time,
So this journey into art started for you when? Did it start with plein air painting, or did it start before that?
With painting, yes, it started with plein air painting. I had a workshop with Todd Williams. I think you knew we were friends because we came to your very first, what are we calling it?
Publisher's Invitational.
There you go, Publisher's Invitational, that's right. And I was pretty new at the time. Maybe I'd been painting with him for about 5 or 6 years. So, but it started with him. I didn't have a degree. I had drawn as a kid, and what I had is like a natural drawing ability and have a really good color sense, although I would say with mixing, I'm still battling that, but when it came to seeing, I was okay at first, good enough that I got the encouragement it took to keep going. But having being past the drawing thing was certainly helpful.
So you ended up going out on the circuit pretty early on and doing a lot of plein air events. What's that like? Yeah,
it was a dream come true. Not for the painting part, but the painting part has been great. But just to travel and see the United States I just have that wanderlust. And I am thankful for every second I've been able to be in these places. Like Rocky Mountain National Park was one of the first that I attended, one of the first national invitationals. And it was kind of on its last legs when I started there, but it's a good event. Just to get to be in Estes Park for 2 weeks was great.
Yeah, I was just there. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And Maui and Easton, Maryland, and Frederick, Maryland, and Florida, Forgotten Coast of Florida. All these are just Door County, Wisconsin. They're all so different. And again, not being much of I don't file away all the information I'm receiving. I really just go there with the expectation that I'm going to see things I'm not used to seeing, and that's a big part of the joy of it for me.
How many events do you think you've done by now?
Well, I was totaling it up because I had to kind of give a tally to someone. I was totaling up actually just any kind of awards I've won, and so I won about 20 in national events, and that was 20 in the maybe top 3 or so. Mm-hmm. And then, I don't know, so I mean, probably triple that or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 6. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and are you still following that path? Because that takes a lot out of you to be on the road all the time. You've got you got a family at home. How do you deal with all of that?
Yeah, it does take a lot out of you, but the career in general takes a lot out of you. You're going to be struggling with the same stuff, in another state as you are in the studio. My wife will tell you, I call her usually the first or second day into an event and threaten to go work for a bank when I get back home or something like that. So it's definitely an emotional roller coaster. But it's very life-giving too on the back end, especially. I'm just so satisfied. So I don't know. It's been a really great experience.
So I want to probe that just a little bit more, John, because I think that it would be helpful for a lot of the people listening to this to understand the artist's perspective on these events. All we see are, we see the publicity for the events, we see the artists that are showing up, but we don't see what goes into getting ready, getting on the road, getting there, preparing what you have to do at night, what you're doing the whole time. Can you kind of give us a thumbnail sketch of what that's like? Let's say first off, how many events are you doing in a typical year now?
Well, I'm actually cutting out quite a bit. I only have 4 this year.
But you were doing as many as 15 a year, right?
I don't think I ever did that many. You're talking about Jason Sacron.
Well, I don't know why it'd be confusing, Jason. But how many have you done typically?
I've done maybe 12 in 1 year, something like that.
Okay, 12. 12 is a lot. That means you're gone typically once a month, on average.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of, so let's talk about any typical show. You're living in Arkansas. You got to get to the show. What do you have to do in terms of preparation? Are you driving to these things mostly? Are you flying? What do you have to do to get ready?
Well, I drive when it's maybe I really enjoy driving. So that's been my transportation of choice. I just have a really old Toyota Sienna van. And then nothing sells paintings like an old van. And I just took all the back seats out of it, and a lot of artists have better, more organized rigs than I do. I just dump it all in the cavern behind my van. So, and I'll go like maybe on 15-hour trips. That's about as far as I care to go. Uh-huh. I've gone a couple where it was maybe a 17-hour journey or something like that. But so if it's in California or Maryland, then I tend to, find a way to fly. And flying isn't that difficult. It takes a little while to figure out. You have to, watch all the airport regulations. And I still have that sticker on top of my paint box that you provided at the PleinAir convention.
Good for you.
It's still in good shape, and I haven't had any of my tubes probed or punctured since putting that on, so that's good. but there's a size regulation on the bag, there's a weight regulation, and so I just kind of think that through. And I have really good shipping, and this may be some advice artists could use, that if you have like an alma mater in your area, or let's say like a business that you work for, they often have better shipping rates if they ship for you. So you might look for an arrangement like that, because I have literally cut my shipping costs about an eighth of what they were when I went straight to the UPS store. I'm not kidding. Like, I can ship like one painting. I can ship a 16 by 20 in a good size box, for like $5 now. So, so I'll just load up boxes and ship them if I have frames around. If not, JFM's often there to provide frames, and I'll just go with them in that case. So, you just got to think it through on that front end. You get some advice, and that it's certainly feasible. It's not. I haven't run into any huge issues flying.
So if you're going off a typical event, how long are you there? A week?
Yeah, the typical event's maybe 4 days of painting, plus about 4 days of waiting around and being at the show, and going. The quick draw can sometimes take all day. Even if you're only drawing, painting for a couple hours, there's a sale, there's a preparation, you're walking around looking for a spot, and then you're kind of worn out after all that. So sometimes quick draws will take up a whole day.
So you got to carry enough. You got to carry enough panels for a week. You got to carry potentially enough frames for a week. You got to carry wire and framing gear and all that kind of stuff, I would imagine. And then everybody's already automatically got a place to display everything, I assume.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And are you typically staying with host families when you go to these things?
Yeah. Yeah, there's always housing with the national jury events. And that's a great experience. I actually like that. A lot of artists on the PleinAir circuit don't, they're not living month to month like some of us. And so they might, like rent a hotel, but I'm always thankful for, having a host. And with each one, there's different things you encounter, but for the most part, it's been a great experience, really getting to know someone. And the events do a really good job of kind of preparing those individuals or those host couples usually that these artists need to work. And so most of that's taken care of in those events. I've found that to be a really great system. And, usually at the end, you just do something out of thankfulness. You might buy them a gift, or write them a nice card, or some events recommend that you give them a painting. So I'll leave behind an 8x10 or something like that. But the experience of these events is great. It's just they work really hard. They tend to really love the arts, and everyone that's involved make the best collectors usually, because they're they're part of it because they just love being around it.
Right.
So it's just a big happy family at all these things.
So your best advice to somebody who wants to find themselves in the plein air circuit, applying for shows, what's your best advice?
Oh gosh, I think it's best to start with some of these open competitions. Don't put all your hopes into the jury ones on the front end. I spent maybe 4 or 5 years. I actually quit my job before I even got into a national invitational, which I think was against your advice, if I recall.
Usually
but,
is.
But I spent, the nice thing was I had every day to work on it. So, but actually sometimes the regional events the sales can be just as good or better, because if you can be a standout artist at one of those events, then maybe you have a little more attention on your work, and maybe you can put a higher price on it. So it's a really great, that's the soil that you can grow out of.
The question I get all the time is, how do you know when you're ready?
Well, you'll sense it at those smaller events. You'll get an idea where you stack up, and where you stack up isn't necessarily based on the right audience. But so what happens, unfortunately, is probably a fair amount of conformity to try to get that PleinAir look. I'm doing quote signs with my fingers right now, but I don't really advise stacking or putting everything into some sort of look that is popular. I think you do what you love, and actually, this is kind of funny. I'm just sort of some insider info, but what I really love about the events, here we go, I'm getting to the meat of it. I didn't think of this at first, but what's really great is that once you're in, each one of those events can be a way to experiment. You can go and you can be like, I've been reading Degas, this past week or something. You can go to an event and start thinking about maybe the way he thinks and what he tries to do. And you don't already have to have your style nailed down. You can go into these things and just be the artist that you are, and be the seeker that you are. And so I've done that actually, and I don't know if it's to the chagrin of the events at all, but they seem to welcome it, and especially the other artists. They'll come up and say, "Man, you're really doing some new things. What's going on here?" And I'm like, "I'm an artist, just it's what you get." So I love it that it's really actually, it's a place that is welcoming to artists, and you can find out who you are, and literally from event to event, I might have something else in mind that I want to work on. And like I remember I was reading books on design one time and thinking about compositions that I don't like, gravitate toward normally. I think one of them was like a kind of a pyramidal type design or circular design, like a tunnel, type of thing. And so in one particular event, I decided that was going to be my focus. And it was really fun. It was great, just going to places and having an intention to start with, So that's just one example. But it's been a real rewarding experience, and that's all I think about is art really anymore. My family's in there somewhere, but I'm just so in love with it still. And so these events really are just they're your family, they're your tribe, and when you get in them and you're working so hard and stuff, you just got to be you and got to try things.
You said you were cutting back. You're not going to do as many events. Now, you said you're cutting back from 12 to 4 events. Tell me what's driving that decision.
Well, I think there's kind of a natural life cycle to the events. I should say for an artist's career, there's a life cycle too. You begin to feel when maybe you overstayed your welcome, because there's a lot of people trying to get into the events, and that's only one thing, and I wouldn't say that's the top reason, but the other reason is just it's pretty tiring and it's been hard on the family, and I want to have a studio voice because I know that just it's diversification. I'm diversifying my career so that I maybe have some leadership in the area of writing, leadership in the area of studio-sized paintings, leadership in the area of teaching, and all these things require, they require a lot of work, and I'm getting better at my marketing and my, just relationships with, in the community, all of that. And I'm also really interested in other tribes besides ours too. Like I've gotten to experience some time over in Italy with the Jerusalem Studio School tribe. I'm not sure they would take that moniker, but it's a great group. They're really wonderful, and they have an angle on things that our group doesn't. I feel like, and so I'm becoming a better artist and a better thinker because of my time there. So I see opportunities like that too.
Okay, I'll take the bait.
No,
I've got to take the bait. Tell me a little bit about the Jerusalem group and how they think differently.
Good. I don't mind talking about them. They're great. Well, I began to notice maybe a stylistic influence over in with the artists that are in the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art, and or is it Philadelphia? I think it's Pennsylvania. PAFA, they call it. And then also, like the Art Students League. These are different groups, and they don't necessarily know us, and we don't necessarily know them, and so there's been some overlap because of Facebook. We're seeing what they're doing, and we're kind of wondering what's going on there. And it's been really fun studying the roots of that, and studying that, the names like Israel Hirschberg and the Jerusalem Studio School will pop out at you, and some really great American artists have made their way over there to learn from Israel and just to be under him. And so I decided I wanted to experience that myself. And 1 year went as a master class student. And I should say that my dad actually funded that trip. I don't let him fund a whole lot, but he came to me and said, I never got to support your art career. So if there's some way I can invest in that, let me know. And I thought about it for about 6 months, and that's how I kind of landed on this place. So I went. It was a 3-week. I chose to go for 3 weeks. You can choose 6 weeks if you want, any amount of weeks really. But I went for about 3 weeks to Civita Castellana, about 30 miles north of Rome. And it's just a really great immersive experience. And you're in this little old town that there's no tourism. And, the landscape's good. I wouldn't say it's the best landscape I've ever been in. It's actually a lot like the Ozarks, so it wasn't unfamiliar in that way. But the architecture is clearly way better. Rather than mobile homes up on the hill, I got to see.
You got
awesome
Tuscan
stuff,
villas, right?
Yeah. So, it's a real informal school, I would say, in the sense that you're not with a teacher every day. You're painting, and you bring your pieces before the teacher, a couple times a week. And then he has a long critique session. He'll go 2 or 3 hours just talking about art. And, I was speed tapping with my fingers, just trying to write down all the wisdom that he was pouring out. So if you can find a teacher like that is just, it's not original wisdom. I mean, he reads Hawthorne quite a bit, and I'm not sure who else, but I know Hawthorne has a huge influence. So he's just pouring out things that he's learned too, but they're just so loaded and so interesting. And I mean, he said lines that I didn't understand. I wrote them down, and I had to think about it for a while. So there's something wonderful about having to translate the verbal or the literature into visual ideas.
How do you think it changed your painting, or did it?
Oh, it changed it a lot, man, and it was kind of self-changed. He didn't say you should do this or that. He said, as far as technique in painting, it was more philosophical. Like, he would ask me, "Do you know who Piero is?" He's a Renaissance artist, and I'm like, "No, man, I don't. I'm sorry. I know who Richard Schmid is." And he was like, "What?" So he would hit me with his consternation every time I showed my naivete, and that forced me into realizing where I really stack up. And he had 23-year-old students in his master class that I feel like are steps ahead of me in what they're doing. So it was not hard to be humbled at that school. But so that it prompted me to really study art, and so I've become somewhat of an art historian over the past couple of years. I bought probably 60 books, and I read them. I actually read these art books. I'm not just looking at pictures. And I've been writing my thoughts, and you would not believe how I feel like I've grown in confidence, authority, reasons for why I paint what I paint, that kind of thing. All that's just come out of that time with him. And, the influences he would throw out, man, I hope this is helpful. I'm just going to keep going. But
Oh, it's very helpful.
Good. Well, the influences he would throw out were not names I knew, like Morandi, Giorgio Morandi and Piero and Degas. I knew some of the Degas ballet dancers, but I didn't really have a great knowledge of his, the extent of his work. The only artist I really knew well was Whistler at that time, and they like Whistler there. So he threw out all these names, and it really got me just to searching. And they weren't like artists that painted like him. Like he has a way of painting. I wouldn't say, over time it's changed, but he has kind of a way of doing things. But his influences don't look just like him. And so that really changed the way I saw things. I realized you don't surround yourself with artists that validate the way you currently paint. You surround yourself with people that really struggled, really thought about art, really, they aren't necessarily virtuosos. They had a life dedicated to art. And so if you surround yourself, with influences like that, you might, really find that your love of the entire history of art will just be so much sweeter. It's more like a savory steak now, and I don't know. I mean, I really feel like my eyes were opened by that.
Give me the names of a couple of books that you kind of believe are essentials. Anything come to mind?
My number one is Hawthorne, and that wasn't just from Israel's influence. I mean, every workshop I've taken with John Budison, Carolyn Anderson, C.W. Mundy, they all are talking about Hawthorne and Henry. Those are two very strong philosophical books. And if you can get a grasp on what those authors are saying, it really can change things. And they're loaded, they're just loaded. So I would say those two for sure. And then read about the lives of artists. There's so much. You feel a relationship with those artists once you read about them. Even if you didn't like their work on the surface, I would recommend, give them a chance. I've read about Degas. The life of Degas is very interesting. There was a book that Israel recommended that has been really good for me, and it's called Corot in Italy, and it explores what could be, some of the very first of outdoor painting. John Carlson, has a popular book. That was a good one, but again, it's full of all these. It's full of formula, and so you almost have to read it and say, yeah, wow, that's true. Trees do kind of do that, and then you got to dump it all so that you're not just drawing them out of your head. So I don't know. Those are 4 or 5 that come to mind.
Excellent. Okay, good. So you talked about why you discovered why you paint, why you do what you do. Tell us why.
Yeah. Well, for a long time I didn't know why, and maybe you're referring to a blog post I just put out, but it's as I think about it, I think the real reason is just there's a part of me that resonates with taking, I'm a project-oriented person, and I love starting a project, going through the confusion and screws laying all over the place and not really sure how this all is going to come together, and then finishing that project, finding a way. And so really art satisfies that within me. It's good work. It's really good work. It's really, for someone like me, it's a satisfying experience in the long, once it's over, especially. And it takes me on an emotional ride that I don't get from much else. An emotional ride that I can be involved in, like a movie can give you an emotional ride, but you're not a participant. But to be a participant and to go through it that way is really satisfying. And I think probably the second best thing for me is the community, and to hear the feedback of the community and to give feedback. And I actually have to kind of try to give feedback because I'm pretty self-focused when I'm around my community, and I hate to say that, but it's true. But when I really give it the time and go around and see the individuality and the beauty of what they're doing and what they're thinking about, I just, man, it's just so great. So I guess those are a couple of the big motivations for me.
You talked a little bit about teaching. Help us understand some of the things that you really like to emphasize with your students. Is there anything, any way that you maybe approach things a little bit differently than other things that you've taken?
Yeah, I would say so. I think, one big revelation for me was that I like to talk about is this idea of light versus color, and I kind of see those as a couple of different camps. That's not to say someone couldn't ride between those camps, but I also see some artists really more focused on light, and I'll tell you the difference if that's something you're interested in.
Of course.
So when my training was in the area of light. That was what was talked about. You learn what light does. You look at art, people that think about it on that in that way, and then you go out into nature and you kind of see through their eyes in a way, like so light, warm light, let's say on a late afternoon, you got kind of an orange influence coming from the actual light source. And then you look at the shadow and you can see a bluish influence. And so an impressionist might see that and think, okay, so I understand the light, and looking at this scene, I understand there's a bluishness, so I'm just going to dip into my blue and put blue in there. So for a lot of years I followed that. And I never had a shadow color I was satisfied with. Maybe once or twice where I went, yes, I got it somehow. And it was usually the ones that were a little more mixed, like, because it's not blue. That shadow you're looking at isn't blue. It's a lot of things. So that's where I think I naturally started to gravitate to this idea of just color. Like you look into a color, and this is what Hawthorne talks about. You look into a color, you take a stab at it. As a matter of fact, looking at a scene, you take a stab at the color that's the most obvious. So, often the sky is like clearly kind of a bluish color, or a blue-green, or a blue-purple, or something like that. And so you put that color note down first. You put it down thick. You put it down with some confidence. And then you look at like what's touching that sky. It might be some hills in the background. And that might be more of a like, you can evaluate that color. You can look at that color and say, the color of that hill is not, it doesn't have the same chroma that the sky does. It's maybe less chroma, okay? And then you can look at that hill and say, the value of that color is, it's a little darker. As a matter of fact, I'm going to like make it a little bit darker because that's going to work with my design in this case. So you make a value decision there. And then what's the hue of it? Sometimes that's not so clear, and when it's not clear, it's often because it leans towards gray. So you need some savvy in your color mixing to be able to achieve these very mature grays. And when I see an artist that can handle that well, I feel like they are just a standout artist. And so I really feel myself drawn to that. And so like Israel Hirschberg, I'll bring him back up because he's one that he's really looking, he's really trying to match up colors as best as possible, and I say best as possible because clearly we're not working with backlit paint. We're working with, just 10 value steps. But, that's what Hawthorne taught. I think Henry was maybe a little more loosey-goosey on that, take a stab and have a little fun with it. And I don't know, I kind of go back and forth. It was nice to visit both camps in my career now and to really figure out what's me, you know. And I think I lean towards somewhere in the middle. I don't know if that makes me a wise philosopher, but I'm the guru that'll tell you need some of both. But I just try to put formula out of my head as much as possible, because the joy in observational outdoor painting for me is just looking and being surprised once again, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about your teaching in terms of what are you finding the biggest problems, the things that you most like to help people with, the things that you're trying to correct, and what are your biggest frustrations as a teacher?
Well, I wouldn't say that I feel frustrated as a teacher. I've heard others say that it can be pretty frustrating, but having a difficult student can be frustrating. But the ones that really care and are learning, I don't mind going through some of the dismantling of their wrong presumptions, and it requires a lot of patience, but I think I'm just kind of made for that. So I really enjoy teaching. I think probably the biggest thing I run into is, most students, and I'm guilty of this too when I was a student, they have a desire to get there quickly. And there's just no replacement for time. There really isn't. So, I help them get over some of the roadblocks maybe I had, where one of them was just thinking that I have a skill and all I need to do is nurture that skill a little bit, and all of a sudden I deserve to have notoriety, and I got some notoriety, I think, long before I really should have had it.
What do you mean?
I didn't. Well, I had a natural skill, but I think God-given talent is it can be very boring if you don't really apply yourself. My daughter is a flautist, and she has natural skill at it, and her teachers keep telling her tone is beautiful. Well, all that does is make her not want to practice as much, because she can be first chair easily, So I think that's the issue with having some natural skill. So for me, it's been sort of like a journey of Picasso to figure out how to be more childlike and let go of the things I'm naturally good at. So anyway, that's sort of off subject, but I see students, if I really drill down on them, their reason for being there is because they look at maybe my lifestyle and others and feel like, gosh, that would be awesome to be there. And it's good to have a goal. It's good to have something in mind like that, but it may not be as fast for you, or it may be faster. I've had students that are doing just fine now in PleinAir events, and it's a real joy to see that. They maybe got better advice than I did early on, and maybe they applied themselves more than I did. But mine's been about an 18-year journey, from start to now.
If you couldn't do this, John, if you couldn't do this, if all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the rug got yanked out and you could no longer paint, what would you do?
Wow, I don't know. I think I would want to be in the art community still somehow. So I'd have to go to prison, I guess, to stop me from doing that. I probably still speak on it. I finally have a vocabulary for it, and it's really fun just talking about it, and so that's probably what I do. I write and talk about it. I was going to say one more thing that's kind of interesting. Music is such a great comparison to what we do, and I say this with some hesitation because I don't want to offend anyone. And this is
Oh,
going to be
go
offensive,
for
I
it.
don't think it's
We're all tough. You can offend us.
Well, I was about to do it anyway. You can tell. Look at what a cellist does. This, and I'm taking this straight from Israel Hirschberg. He mentioned this, and I think it's such a great concept. That look at what a cellist has to do, or a flautist. I'll just use my daughter again as an example. My daughter spent all these years, just learning other people's music. She hasn't written one song yet, and I think she would do just fine if she tried. But she spent the last 8 years of her school career learning the works of every great, composer, and she's mimicked them, and she has those tunes in her head, and she can talk about them. She knows the lives of some of them. I think. I don't know. I've never really grilled her on that, but someone that really wanted to be the best would take the time to learn even the stories of Bach or Debussy or whoever, and then then it's time. Then you can compose. Now it's your turn. Take that history now and apply it. So if I look at my own career, I mean, my very first workshop, I'm outdoors, kind of mimicking my teacher, but I'm looking at that hill across the way, and I have no connection to it from any knowledge of art history. I'm just looking at it and thinking, okay, well, there's some shapes, there's some colors, and I do all that. Well, something's kind of missing there. It's kind of funny. It would be like being a flautist, and you're in your first flute class, and you say, well, listen, teacher, to this song I made. And the teacher says, wait a second, have you ever played a note on your flute before? No. Okay, well, and you play your little song, and you may be very happy with it, but there's no connection there. So I feel like nature is a great teacher, clearly, and it's the one thing that drew me in from the start. But if that very first year I had begun reading the books that I had read the last couple of years, I would be so much farther along because I would have reasons, I would have intention behind what I do.
Well, I'm going to debate that. I'm going to debate that with you for just a second.
Let's do it.
I think that you have to have, first off, passion is something that develops over time, and you have to have interest and passion to pursue certain things. You also have to have a level of experience before something will speak to you. I remember, for instance, taking a photography class at the University of Miami when I was 17 or 18 years old, and I had it was a portraiture class, and I had never shot a portrait in my life. And I went to that class, and about 80% of what he was talking about, it was right over my head because I had never done it. Most of the people there had done it and were looking to improve on it. And I think that had you read those books, and maybe you did, at a undeveloped stage of your life as an artist, most of what was in there isn't going to speak to you. If you reread them today, you're going to have a whole different take on it. So everything kind of comes in its time.
Yeah. It's like when you make a kid take piano lessons, and all they're doing is just learning. Maybe their heart's in composing, and they burn out, because the teacher won't let them. So I see what you're saying. I mean, I really do think that it goes hand in hand with your own desire and passion. It's a great point. It really is. So let me back up a little bit then and say it would have been good if I had discovered those books maybe 10 years into it or 5 years into it. So I just didn't have direction being a self-taught artist. So
yeah.
And I think a lot of students going to good schools like Indiana University or PAFA or some of these institutions that still teach painting, they're getting both at the same time, and that's probably a really great way to start. But
so where's the part that you were going to offend us?
Oh, well, I don't know. I mean, I think the work of learning history is very difficult. it's not natural. You'd rather just paint. And a lot of my students feel like they don't have much time left. They think that the remaining 20 years of their life isn't enough to really develop as an artist, and so they probably want the fast way there. But
well, what do you believe?
Now I'm offending. No, I don't mean to. I just mean that that's their desire is just to get the same kind of peace and joy out of painting that they think I'm getting, and and I think I probably confuse them a little bit when I talk about how much work it really is. I wrote a line, and this is in my kind of a book I'm developing right now. I'll just say it here because it applies to this. That painting, why do we paint at all? It's a byproduct of peace and free time. It's what happens when you're done, laboring in the fields, and now you're sitting on the porch and you're like, well, look at this. When I smear this, on my hand or whatever, it makes a color. Well, that's interesting. One thing leads to another, and now you have some way of expressing. But that comes out of peace and free time, and so I think students are drawn to art. To me as a teacher and to you as a teacher, because they see a peaceful promise in that. They know what it comes from. They know where it derives. But the byproduct of painting isn't peace necessarily. For the students find that it's the other way around. Peace, painting is a byproduct of peace, but peace isn't necessarily a byproduct of painting. So they run into frustrations, and I still run into frustrations. So that isn't necessarily what they wanted to hear when they come. They want to see someone that's done it so many times that they can just paint a tree right out of their head. And they want to learn the quickest way to get to that. But that wouldn't be good for me as a teacher to show them that. It would just help me get more students. And so, that's offensive language too. I think I differ from some artists in that way, but I really feel like students need a realistic expectation of how much work it's going to be and how it may always feel like work.
Well, there are certainly piece components to it. I totally agree that every time I paint, I get more frustrated. Every time I think I know something, I find something else that frustrates me. But I also find great joy and peace and relaxation in the process, in spite of the fact that it's ever challenging. So I suppose, to some extent, it's like golf, in the sense that people go out, they're frustrated, they're challenged, but they still go out every day because they're into it. They like being outdoors. So I don't mean to offend anybody and make them think that this is golf.
Yeah, that's right. It's better than golf. I know what you're saying. It's and I completely agree. That's all I'm trying to say. But maybe because the point that it's work doesn't get pushed as much as the fact that it's so much fun and joyful, I feel an obligation to give more of a realistic view of what someone might be in for. So.
You once
there's
told
levels. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
There's levels of understanding. I got to a point one time where I said, I've achieved everything I want to achieve. I can't believe it. It was almost like a death. Like I just felt like I'd done everything in life I wanted to, and then I had to find kind of a new goal. And I would say probably, my most recent goal is just to be the best artist that I can be, be maybe even one of the best that's ever lived. That sounds kind of pious, but I wouldn't mind that. I don't think any artist would, but yeah. So I don't know how realistic that is, but it's going to drive me. So, so artists can have different goals. That's okay. They don't all have to have that as their goal, but they need to know that me as a teacher, that's what they're going to get.
Yeah. So you once told me that you have you boil things down to three things when you're making art. This is something you teach your students. Do you recall what you would have said?
Yeah. I try to make it as simple as possible. So, everybody comes up with some acronym or 3-step process. But in my case, it's not really a process. It's more of a 3 very important things, so to speak. One is to have an intention before you begin painting. And by the way, these are steps for outdoor painting. They are steps for if you want your outdoor painting to maybe have some artistic longevity, so to speak, rather than just a study. So that's what the name of my workshop is Making Art Outdoors. So anyway, every artist needs an intention, so to speak, and for me, it can be all kinds of things. I might look at a scene and think, man, there's kind of a cubist intention maybe out there. I see these shapes broken up in very geometric forms and stuff. And so I might think, gosh, that could be fun. So that's an example of intention. Or it could be like looking out there and you see like an atmosphere or a color in the atmosphere. Like I remember one I did that had a kind of a silvery light. And so that was my intention, silvery light. And so then everything becomes a part of that intention, and it helps you stay on that intention. And, and a great way to really seal your intention is to already give it a title, So, in that particular painting I'm thinking of, I called it Silver Light. So you nail down an intention like that, and the next thing, or just another thing, is to plan a design. The intention's good, but you also kind of need a substructure to your painting. Now, when I was in Italy, he actually had the students just tape, a large piece of canvas basically to the board, and then begin painting from some center of interest, perhaps, or just a clash of colors that you were interested in. So, then your design can be a little more free, and then later maybe how you prop the painting is your real design. But a lot of us are used to having those panels around, and you can cut a panel, but I tend to try to first see the design within that shape and that size, that proportion. So that takes a little planning. There's a lot of great advice on that. Like Joshua Bean really thinks it through, and he tries to even make an art piece out of that design, which he does with, I believe, like graphic pens, markers, so to speak. So, so thinking through that design is pretty vital. Or thinking through it as you paint, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter how you get there. And then a third thing that I really focus on is finding the essence of what I'm looking at. And that is where I get into some of my methods of being painterly as an artist, where if you can see, generalized notes of color in areas that are busy, you can avoid having to spend all your time drawing, and you can literally make a color that shows both shadow and light and texture. There's colors that look like texture if you put them in the right spot and they're the right color. So that's the essence of essence. So those three things are what I teach.
So the three things are find intention, plan and design, and capture the essence.
That's right.
All right. Excellent. Well, John, this has been a fascinating conversation and something that could go on for forever, I think, between the two of us, and hopefully we'll have you back again sometime. But thank you so much for your time and being on the PleinAir podcast.
And thank you. It's a big honor, and I really appreciate what you do for our community.
It's very kind.
So I hope we have chances to overlap in the future.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks again to John Lasater. What a great and thoughtful guy. Very introspective. I really respect that. Well, shall we do some marketing?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
You know that in the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your marketing questions, and you can email me. I've been getting a lot lately. Eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Here's a question from Caitlin in Phoenix, Arizona. What should happen the minute I sell a painting? Should I reach out? Can I stay in touch? How much is too much? Well, of course, it depends on how it's sold. If it's sold in person, like you're at an art show or you sell it in person somehow, thank them for buying it. Tell them you'd like to stay in touch with them and show them your progress, maybe send your newsletter and ask for an address or an email or both, and tell them you have a little surprise that you'd like to send them. And that's how you get the address, okay? If it's a gallery sale, you want to have permission to do that, and the way you do that is just email a thank you note. Ask the gallery to allow you to email a thank you note, and you can mail your little surprise then. Your surprise might be a box of note cards with that painting on it, and of course your contact information is on the back, or a coffee cup with that painting on it. Nothing that's too expensive, but just a nice little gesture to stay top of mind. If they're writing handwritten notes, which people still do these days, then, you know, their painting is on it, your name is on it, they're telling your friends about you, whether you like it or not. And at the end of the note cards, put a little thing before the last card says, hey, I'll send you some more, my compliments, just let me know when this is empty, and send them some more, because you want them thinking about you and writing stuff with your painting on it all the time. The other thing is your gallery may have different feelings about this. You have to have an open conversation with them, but basically the idea is that you want them to know that you're not going to burn them, that you're going to have contact. And if somebody does buy something direct through you, first off, you'll redirect them to the gallery. And secondly, if for some reason it happens, you'll give them the commission. That's the only thing they're concerned about. They just need to know they can trust you. I'd like to see them get your newsletter. I'd like to see them, if you're using like our Art Marketing in a Box program, we're sending out specialized emails and specialized direct mail pieces all the time that are going to turn them into second and third customers. But you want to be appropriate. You don't want to badger people too much. You just, do what you're comfortable with. But you're probably going to be able to do a lot more than you think, because you're probably a little uncomfortable with the whole thing. Anyway, next question is from Danny in Cleveland, Ohio. Hi, Danny. He says, let's see, what's it say? I see a lot of artwork in places like Targets and hanging in hotels and things like calendars and mouse pads. How do I get a piece of that action? Well, it's called licensing, Danny. To license your artwork to someone for a specific purpose, they will pay you a royalty. Now, usually it's somewhere between 2 and 7% a royalty. For instance, I'm licensing my book to a publisher in China, and they're going to pay me like a 4% royalty on everything they sell, and they might even give me a little bit of an upfront. So that's the way it's done. And basically, they will license your images to a print company that makes and licenses prints, or maybe they sell mugs or mouse pads or calendars. Like galleries, they get barraged from a lot of artists. So you need to find a licensing agent. They know how to do it. They know how to do the contracts. They know to make sure that you're not getting taken advantage of. And you can work direct, but an agent will probably get you more progress, because there's a lot of artists trying to work direct. Anyway, also, sometimes there are hotel buyers that are going through shows just to kind of look for art to put into hotels. The hotel buying industry for art is a completely different industry, but they still go through licensing agents in most cases. And there is an annual licensing expo. So people who want to put their name on things can go to the licensing expo, buy a booth, but that's expensive. So that's why just using an agent is usually a good idea. I have friends who make some good money with this. One friend who makes a few $1,000s a month doing it. He's a rock star artist and deserves it. But it's a good thing. And I think it'd be great to see your paintings hanging on the walls in a hotel or in Target or on a mouse pad or anything else. So give it a shot. And I wish you success. And I hope if you have success, Danny, that you'll let us know. Anyway, I hope this Marketing Minute has helped you. Well, again, I hope to see you in San Francisco at the PleinAir convention. Please make a point to introduce yourself. I like to meet everybody that I don't know and tell me a little bit about yourself. They keep me really busy and crazy, and so if I'm in a hurry, please, I'll apologize in advance, but I'm going to try to spend time with you, so make sure that you point yourself out and make sure that I get to know you. I also want to see your paintings, so pull your phone out and be ready, okay? Anyway, that's cool. I will see you at the convention. Also, if you've not seen my blog, it's called Sunday Coffee. It comes out when? Sunday mornings. And it's kind of fun to do. Every Sunday morning, I sit on the back porch and I start writing, and you never know what's going to come out. Anyway, you can find it at coffeewitheric.com, and that's where you go to subscribe for free. Always fun doing this. Love doing the podcast. I will see you again, hopefully next week, if I can get this done and got the PleinAir convention. By the way, we're doing some cool things at the PleinAir convention. We're going to be recording 2 or 3 sessions I'm moderating that will be turned into live podcasts. So we'll have a live audience. We'll be doing them. And so you'll want to look for those. They're coming up soon. They're going to be fun. My name is Eric Rhodes. I'm the publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. Remember, it's a big world out there. I want to see you go paint it. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhodes. You can help spread the word about PleinAir painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 PleinAir painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.